Right folks, and welcome back to the shed. In the last teardown video we removed our engines, cylinder head, and we stripped out the valves. Moving forward in our teardown series, we'll carry on by now removing the engine block and piston assembly. I would like to note that this teardown is based on a pushrod engine, so please bear in mind that you may have a camshaft engine which are slightly different. So let's get started by taking a look at what tools we'll need for today's job. Pair of pliers, sorted sockets. In my case I only need a 10mm socket, extension bar, a T-bar or a ratchet, large flathead screwdriver, a set of picks, and I've got here a Tipex pen, and I'll be using this to mark parts so I know where they go when I'm rebuilding the engine. Right, let's move on. So we've got our engine back in front of us, and what we'll do is we'll go ahead and move the head gasket if we haven't done so already. Again, this will be replaced on the rebuild, but for the time being we'll keep a hold of it just for reference purposes. Next, remove the positioning dials, and be careful here as there may be an O-ring on one of them. Once we have these out, we can go ahead and thread them onto a small cable tie, and we'll use a piece of masking tape just to label up where this came from before we put it into storage. As you get deeper into the engine, or you begin working on engines with multiple cylinders, it's a very good practice to keep a note of where everything goes, as it does save headaches later on. Moving along, we can now remove the two bolts that hold the block to the crankcase. Two bolts removed. We'll now pull the block from the crankcase. Now if it sticks, we can use a wooden or plastic mallet just to give it a few taps to encourage it to break free from the bottom section. Now with the block removed, we can continue on with removing the lower positioning pins and any O-rings, and again go ahead and thread them onto the zip tie. Moving in for a closer look, we can now see the whole piston, and below that we can see the connecting rod. Now from here we will refer to the connecting rod as the con rod. We can go ahead and grab our pick and remove the C-clip which holds the piston pin in place, being careful not to send it flying. Or to drop it in the engine. Anyway, once you have the C-clip out, you can go ahead and remove the piston pin. Once we've got the pin out far enough, we can then lift the piston clear of the con rod, and we'll place that to the side for the time being. Can't believe I dropped that. You can now see the con rod small end, which we can inspect for cracks or scratches on the surface. Ovaling where the pin slides through. We can slide the pin in and check its fit, and that's a snug fit. Any damage and we need to replace the con rod. So that's all good. We can now move the lower of our engine out the way. Right, let's have a look at our piston. And we have the piston as a whole. We've got the crown of the piston, and this piston has valve indents, which your piston may or may not have. Moving down the piston, we have the piston rings and the oil scraper, which we'll go ahead and remove just now. Now with the oil scraper is made up of 3 separate parts. You have the inner section and the 2 outside rings. Now to remove this properly, we have to remove the 2 outer rings first, before we can then remove the middle section. Once we have the 2 rings out, the middle section will just come out without a fight. Once we have the rings removed, we can now see the piston ring grooves, and in between the piston ring grooves we have what's called the lands, and in the oil scraper ring groove we have oil drains, and then we have where the piston pin goes, and below that we have the rest of the skirt. Check for any damage in the piston. Scratches along the skirt is normal, but any excessive wear can be a sign of piston slap. Other things to look out for is ovaling of the pin seat, any cracks in the metal, and on the crown check for any pitting or burning. Anything like that means we need to replace this piston. Going back to the piston pin, this can also be called the gudgeon pin or wrist pin, and these are used interchangeably. Going back to the block, on the left side we have what looks like a large screw head. This is not a screw head, this is the end of the rocker shaft, which we need to remove so we can take out the lower rocker arms. Now to do this it's easy enough. What we can do is we can get a screwdriver and give a sharp hit to this part here, which will push this out, or we can wedge a screwdriver in between the casing and the rocker arm and just give that a twist like that, and once this is out far enough we can then just get a screwdriver in there and pop it out. We can then take that shaft out all the way, and we can take our rocker arms out. Now when you're doing this, there's a wave washer in here, make sure you don't lose it, and we can take a closer look at the lower rocker shaft. The lower rocker arms are straightforward. We can see cup where the rod sits and the side that rides on the cams. Just check for any heavy wear on the lever section. If any, it might be time to replace them. Now with the shaft out we can take a better look. We can see that there's no thread on this part, and that's because it's held in by a bolt that passes down through here and it threads into this section here. And again, this line is an indicator to tell you which way to put this in. Alright guys, bringing the block back in, we can see that our steel sleeve extends down past the aluminium outer, and that goes into the crankcase. You might think there's not much to see, but probably more than what you think. Get some extra lighting here. If you have a look down inside the sleeve, you can see a cross-hatch pattern. This is honing marks, and these marks are completely normal, and they help with the lubrication of the cylinder wall. But as we look further up, we can see where the piston rides along the wall that they aren't as prominent, and that's just normal wear. Now we'll check over the surface, make sure there's no scratches, which there isn't, and we can check there isn't any lips where the piston reaches top dead centre and bottom dead centre. And the best way to do that is with a fingernail. And we don't have any lips. If you go this deep into the engine, then I would suggest that you at least have the cylinder walls re-honed. It's not 100% necessary, though it's good practice. But if you do, either find someone to do it professionally or has the tools. But if you want to do it yourself, do not buy cheap, nasty eBay special honing tools, because you will regret it. So, maintenance and issues. There is no direct maintenance to be carried out on a regular basis, although oil changes and oil level checks are an important part of keeping our block and piston in good working condition. Now, common issues starting with the lack of oil include excessive wear and tear, excess heat, which can result in friction welding, and yes, oil does play a part in engine cooling, and all engines, including water cooled, can have broken cooling fins, more so on air cooled. Might not seem like a big issue, but it can be. Leaking head gasket, leaking piston rings, burned, pitted or hole in the piston crown. We can have excess wear on the piston pin, and indirectly we can have a blocked breather pipe. Now remember, this isn't a full list of issues that can occur with the block and piston, just a summary. So that's it for today's video. We covered the engine block and piston, we broke them down, had a closer look, discussed maintenance and issues. Now our next teardown video will be the clutch and stator. This video was supposed to be that one, but when I started scripting I realised the block was still attached to the crankcase. Right, if you like this, then please give it a thumbs up, because that helps me. If you want to see future uploads, then subscribe and ring the notification bell. And if you know anyone that would appreciate this video, then please do share it with them. Until next time guys, I'll catch you later.
Look at these hands, look at them go.